my concept for this podcast was fork in the road. So at least for me, I mean, I turned 32 in a couple months. I look back on my life and realize that there were some fork in the road moments, some decisions that I made that could take me in one direction or can take me in another. And that ultimately brought me to this point talking to both of you. So in that form of reflection, let's then now think ahead to who could be facing those fork in the road moments in the NFL this year. They could be players, they could be teams, they could be coaches, and outline what the destination might be on either side or just what the fork actually is. Does that make sense?
Question.
Are we good in that concept? Yes, go ahead, Daigle.
Clearly not. Why fork in the road instead of Crossroads? That's my only.
I actually almost suggested Crossroads too.
That's my only debate about this.
Because I feel like a fork in the road forces you. Is this a Southern term? I mean, it forces you to make a decision one way or the other. Crossroads to me is like when you're ordering, when living in New York City and you need to designate what your crossroads are so they know exactly where you are at that moment. Fork in the road is like, oh, this is a big decision. It's a big moment and it's going to be a life-changing decision in the end.
Josh has clearly never heard of Robert Johnson and the Crossroads Blues, one of the most famous blues songs ever written. And Crossroads is a very similar concept to a fork on the road. They're basically the exact same thing.
Crossroad also the quote Robert Frost used when discussing the road, the path he took.
Well then, I just got an education. And so maybe we roll with Crossroads here. You will know before I do what is actually in the title of this podcast.
Well, let's give it a shot.
Let's give it a shot. Diggle, go first. Be the guinea pig for us.
Wow, this is a big moment in my Crossroads. I think Cam Newton's career as a starter is currently at a crossroads. He would unquestionably be the best quarterback in Chicago, Las Vegas, New England, and probably with the Chargers just by parking his car at their stadiums. But for the sake of realism, those franchises likely won't occur. And there are two candidates I think make the most sense. But even then, you can probably push back against both of them. And one is the Steelers, who have throughout this offseason reportedly said they have no interest in signing another quarterback and are comfortable with their backups despite seeing what their backups offered, which is next to nothing last year. And plus, realistically, Cam Newton probably does threaten any quarterback room because he's still very, very talented. And then the Broncos, I think, is another one because just the fact that you're going to go into the year with Drew Lock and Jeff Driscoll as your only two options despite beefing up that offense altogether, seems like a great fit for Newton at least to come in and maybe even like trickle down teaching to those younger guys. But yeah, we are at a crossroads if we're doing this correctly with Cam Newton.
We are. He would make so much sense. It makes no sense that the Steelers have not signed Cam Newton. I mean, they just saw like the perils of having a complete roster except for a backup quarterback last year. But I wouldn't be surprised, if that's like Ben Roethlisberger ego issues. Ben Roethlisberger went from saying he was going to maybe retire to then they drafted Mason Rudolph. And he's like, I'm playing 10 more years. Like, you know what? Screw this. He was like so offended by them taking Mason Rudolph. So fair to say he would probably be threatened by Cameron Newton. But yeah, Cam Newton, 32 teams in the league should be offering Cam Newton $5.5 million to be their backup quarterback. Like, it makes no sense.
And the other page of that is a couple waves after the initial free agency period. I mentioned Jameis Winston to the Pittsburgh Steelers and how I thought that made a lot of sense. And immediately Steelers fans came out and said, well, they don't have the cap space for it. Well, one, you can basically create cap space. We've seen that across the league at any moment, especially when it's, single digits of millions of dollars. But also we saw that Jameis Winston almost took the veteran minimum because he got pitched by Sean Payton to be like, hey, let me teach you how to rework your quarterback game, and then you can make a whole bunch more money following this or possibly be our starter. Obviously, the Steelers make a ton of sense. Now, I also think that there's like some underlying reason here why Cam Newton is not even on an NFL team right now. And I think some people can point to, his personality and how it's not that of a backup quarterback. I don't think that's the case. It absolutely is health. And, the immediate health is his foot and how he obviously played in a Liz Frank injury last year, a broken foot, and his game was suffered because of it. I mean, it was awful at times. there were also some high points, but more than that, it's the shoulder. And the shoulder is a long-term concern. And it's not necessarily right now. It's not necessarily in September. It's how it's going to be in November and more so in December. And I think that that's something that teams just don't know because they aren't able to work on him and look at him one-on-one. And so I'm fascinated to see if Cam Newton signs with anyone, because I actually think that's an if at this point.
You go, John.
I was going to say, I also think it's more intimidating when players work out the gospel music, something about the fire and brimstone of hell behind you as you bench weights. So that also makes me want to sign him immediately. But I think it does come down to, as you always have to preface it when talking about, quote unquote, these times, unsolicited, unwarranted, scary, yada, yada, yada times. It does come down to, as you mentioned, his health concerns and just not being able to get a physical. And then, of course, the long-term value of that shoulder.
Yeah, he got screwed by two separate things beyond his control. One was when the Panthers released him. They did it 10 or 11 days into the start of free agency, where other teams had already made decisions about what they were going to do at starter or even the backup. And then, the coronavirus, not being able to get his shoulder. Like Josh said, it's the foot and the shoulder. I mean, the foot's concerning enough, but it really is the shoulder where he did not look the same with the shoulder. And a lot of people have been hurt by not being able to have teams examine them, but Cam is probably number one on the list of players set back by teams not being able to examine his health history.
He's kind of going, because I wonder if he does have any offers at all. And we have no reports of him getting any offers. I do wonder if he even ends up on an NFL team. Like, I wonder what the odds would be that he just sits out the entire season. Because he's on this kind of interesting path of not signed to a team right now, waiting for an injury, and then coming in like Superman, like we've heard he is before, and saving the day for an NFL franchise. I mean, most recently, I can think of when Teddy Bridgewater hurt his knee, went down, and like immediately the Minnesota Vikings panicked and traded for Sam Bradford for a first-round selection. Is it going to take that type of scenario, Daigle, for him to land a starting job here? Or is it something that as camps open up, whenever they do, that he can just come in as a backup and work his way up from there, which I actually think that is less likely than the former.
So maybe it's not even his role as a starter that's currently facing a fork in the road. Maybe it's his career as a whole that we're talking about. It might be. Yeah.
It truly might be. And it's one of those answers, and honestly, a mystery that I don't think we have an answer to right now. I think it's fair not to have an answer to.
He should have been signed sight unseen.
I agree.
Absent of physical. I mean, it's just insulting and ridiculous that he's still unsigned.
Mysteries. Go ahead.
I totally agree. And I mean, I'm one of the biggest Cam Newton fans you'll ever find. And I think that he absolutely still has top 15 quarterback talents in him. But at the same time, I think we can all be realists and understand why he's not an NFL team. At least we can put ourselves in a team's shoes and how they often think in previous years and understand why he isn't signed right now.
They think from a fear-based perspective because they're worried about, like you said, him like threatening a starting QB at this point, which I mean, a good organization wouldn't worry about that. But I don't know. Then even the Patriots won't sign it. It's just, it's a mystery.
Mystery is also the third working title of this podcast, but we think it's copyrighted, so we have to stick with two.
Let's stick with Crossroads, and I'm going to throw out Todd Gurley being at the crossroads of his career as well. I mean, is this the end of his life as an NFL player and feature back? Because he is only on a one-year contract for $5.5 million. So there is some skepticism across the league that he might have the longevity to stick as a feature back at the NFL level. Yet that role is right there for him to have the taking in that backfield in Atlanta. I mean, we question the health of Todd Gurley, but still every single year of his NFL career, he's racked up at least 250 touches, even last season. But the biggest question is why the significant drop-off in production. I mean, he dropped down to 4.2 yards per touch last season compared to 6.1 and 5.8 the previous two seasons. And I think you can side some of that and blame some of that on Todd Gurley, the player, and maybe the status he is in right now, just coming off, an offensive player of the year campaign. But I think you can also point to the offense that he was in. running by that offensive line, which was not talented, which was not as good as it was in the previous years, and Sean McVay not being able to get much going and momentum going offensively like he had the previous 2 years prior to that. But this is going to be a telling year for the future of what is Todd Gurley in the NFL.
I would argue last year was already the career crossroads for Todd Gurley because, really the turning point seemed to be that 54-51 Chiefs-Rams game. He rolled into that game like as dominant as any running back had been like the past 3 or 4 seasons. And he picked up an ankle injury like coming into that game, before that game, and then somehow after that, everything just snowballed from him for there, where his knee began acting up again. And, all offseason, last offseason, where we got the really ominous Todd Gurley, like, this is chronic. Gurley's, own trainer saying he may not be the same. And we don't quite know because there were other variables at play with the Rams last year, like you said, like the offensive line being horrible, taking a major step back. But, we already got the warnings for Todd Gurley last offseason, and then the proof was very much in the pudding where he did not look like the same player. And, do we have any real reason to expect a drastic change in the status of his knee this year? And unfortunately, this is just not something that's that uncommon for NFL running backs either. Terrell Davis, that's 20 years ago already, but we've seen example. I just saw yesterday, I saw someone retweet Eddie Lacy, and, I hadn't thought of Eddie Lacy in like 3 years.
It's so true.
30, like it's nuts.
Yeah.
And I really hope. Todd Gurley was a rare running back talent, and I hope last year maybe it was more like factors beyond his knee. Obviously, the knee will be a factor, but I hope maybe the offensive line played a bigger factor than we knew. But I would argue the crossroads moment has already come, and he's on the downslope. I hope that's not the case.
Just shy of 1,500 touches in a 5-year career. It still seems insane that he doesn't turn 26 until August. And the Rams still chose, yes, they took on advantages in actual cash rather than cap space and cutting him, but they still chose to take on $25 million in dead money rather than carrying him along for another 3 years after that $60 million extension. So it's just a very odd position he's in, especially given his young age and the fact that the Falcons kind of need him too. Like, yeah,
yes.
They have Bill Smith and Brian Hill, but there is no real competition for touches, which is why, closing the window and making it more smaller picture about fantasy, like he would be a first-round pick for the opportunity alone if there weren't so many questions surrounding his knees, and who knows about that, because even they've come out and mentioned that they're not sure about his health right now, which is an odd stance. But yeah, it's just it is a true crossroads right now.
Yeah, 2017 he was the running back 1. 2018 he was the running back 3. Then 2019 dropped all the way to running back 14, and now he's being drafted as the running back 16 behind Austin Eckler, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Leonard Fournette, even just above Jonathan Taylor and Melvin Gordon and Chris Carson. I understand it, and it's what we can see, but it's also the usage that changed, because and a crossroads here might be a cliff in some ways, because he fell off a cliff in terms of the targets that he faced, or saw. 87 targets in 2018, 81 targets in 2017, I believe, and then 49 targets last season. I understand defenses started eliminating the easy stuff that Sean McVay put on the field. I also ask this question, Pat. At the core of it, if we say yes, Todd Gurley in the state that we saw him last year is what we see him in this year, but he's still able to play 16 games. So you still get him for an entire regular season. Don't you trust this Falcons offense just as much as you trusted the Rams offense last year, if not even more, just a little bit? And if that's the case, because of the workload, we expect him to get 200 plus touches. Can't you see easy value here with Todd Gurley at running back 16?
Yeah, because we already saw what a diminished running back can do in the Falcons offense, the past several years, where Devontae Freeman, where he was healthy, was still RB2 viable. So yeah, absolutely. Unless, the knee has spiraled completely out of control. 'Cause it is weird. John alluded to it. Even Dirk Cotter said he didn't know what was going on with his knee. So it seems like, maybe we're in this truly uncharted territory here with Todd Gurley's health, but I mean, absolutely. Even if we get 2019 Todd Gurley, maybe that's like a good outcome for him at this point, his health. But yeah, we've seen the way the Falcons use the running backs for even a highly diminished Todd Gurley. If he stays on the field, it will probably be an easy RB2.
And cliffhanger, by the way, the fourth working title of this podcast.
All right, let's move on. Patrick Daugherty, who is facing a crossroads in the NFL in 2020?
I mean, I don't know if I was doing the concept the same way as you guys, but
well, make it work. Make it work.
That brings their own interpretation.
Than the New England Patriots. I mean, who are moving on from an NFL icon, like an era-defining player, and and no rush to replace him. It appears very comfortable doing so with Jarrett Stidham, third year now, fourth rounder, second year, fourth rounder. Oh, that's right. I was thinking of Auburn in 2018. Hasn't even put any good football on film since like 2017. But they seem to basically the Patriots at their crossroads. Is this all about Bill Belichick's mind or is it not? And Bill Belichick clearly believes he can easily have a winning team with Jarrett Stidham, because I don't buy any talk that the Patriots are tanking. I mean, talk about something that is not in Bill Belichick's constitution. And yeah, we're going to get it's not a fair debate, like who deserves more credit for the Patriots dynasty, Belichick or Brady. But I mean, we're going to get some data points right off the bat because Bill Belichick is betting on himself. Tom Brady bet on himself in Tampa Bay, and Bill Belichick is betting on himself going with another complete unknown commodity at quarterback. And I honestly like his chances. We already saw to me like what a post-Brady offense Patriots team can look like last year, where he was severely diminished and they had terrible weapons and not an explosive offense, but they just compensated with the best defense in the league. And there's no team I am more interested in seeing in 2020 than the New England Patriots.
It's a crossroads for everyone. It's a crossroads for the coach, the quarterback, who we may speak of later, who is now gone, for the offense as a whole. What even is their offense now? As we've hinted and alluded to, potential more 12 personnel this upcoming year, under center for Jarrett Stidham, or as some rumors have had it, Brian Hoyer as their starter. I mean, it's literally the entire organization at a crossroads.
And everyone has stayed the same except for Tom Brady. Like this team is almost virtually unchanged except for maybe the greatest quarterback of all time leaving, which is obviously a massive change. But you still have that backfield of Sony Michel, James White, Rex Burkhead. How efficient will they be without Tom Brady? Plus, you can throw in Damian Harris as well. Yeah. Still haven't forgotten about him, even though we probably should. I mean, Julian Edelman is still there. Mohamed Sanu, who they traded for a second-round pick last year. N'Keal Harry, who did almost nothing in his rookie year, is still there. And maybe the biggest question of all is, how does this impact Josh McDaniels potentially ever getting a head coaching job ever again? That's kind of an underlying story here, because what if, because he was mentioned a lot with the Carolina job and, the Colts job that he removed himself from at the last second a couple years ago. What if they do come out and they have this top 10 unit offensively, top 15 unit offensively? That is a massive feather in the cap of Josh McDaniels. Or the inverse could be the same. They could be a bottom 5, a bottom 7 offense in the NFL. And then what does that say about Josh McDaniels, who, as Pat alluded to, there is no connection anymore. Everyone is removed and everyone kind of has to prove themselves once again, despite obviously winning so many Super Bowls all as a group.
Yeah, so the whole Patriots offseason was like a subtweet of Tom Brady. When you point, there was like basically no other movement. There was like the whole problem with the roster was the quarterback, and we're on to Cincinnati at quarterback. And Josh, if they're good, I'm not giving the credit to Josh McDaniels, by the way. I'm just giving it to Bill Belichick. We saw Josh McDaniels flame out the Broncos. I saw him be spectacularly inept with my then St. Louis Rams. I've seen Josh McDaniels away from Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, and it was not pretty. And but yeah, it's just, you laid out again all the reasons just to be fascinated by this team, and I think they're going to pull it off. I think they're going to do it. I just think Bill Belichick is that. I mean, we haven't – this is so long ago. I mean, we have seen it. I mean, Tom Brady missed all of 2008, and they went 11-5.
And Pat, somehow the expectations are super low for them. And I understand it on one hand, but then you have mentions of like, oh, well, they should be tanking. They should be trying to lose. Like the expectations could not be any lower for this Patriots team, despite what they've shown in the past. And I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome for Bill Belichick, where he's not, no one's asking the question, well, he has to get to the playoffs or else what happens? Is he really the head coach? Is he really as good as we think he is? It's almost the opposite. And that's a fascinating dynamic, which I didn't think we would see at all. And so that even gives them a little bit more time, even though they probably don't even care about how much time the media or the fans or whoever else want to give them.
I'm interested to see their defense because they lost a number of important pieces in their defensive trenches in particular, and they don't get the easiest schedule as they ended up with last year. They don't get to face Josh Rosen, Luke Falk, and Case Keenum this year. So I'm curious what they do on that side of the ball.
Yeah, and they still have maybe the best secondary in the NFL and obviously the NFL Defensive Player of the Year.
I'll find out.
And Stephon Gilmore.
Who is the favorite in the AFC East in your mind? Is it the Buffalo Bills or is it I honestly think it's the New England Patriots.
That's awesome. I still think that's great.
I just don't even think it's
like
that
the Patriots.
Of an opinion. It just doesn't even strike me as controversial. I don't think it's like a hot take. Like to me, like are we going to bet on Josh Allen or are we going to bet on Bill Belichick? It's kind of how I'm looking at it. And I'm betting on Bill Belichick.
That's fair. All right, Daigle, who is facing a crossroads in the NFL?
Let's go to the next one then. I try to avoid some social media discussions because I just don't have time to fight. But today we got time, Josh, and I think Tom Brady's arm is at the crossroads. His fewest touchdowns in a full season since 2006, his lowest completion rate in the last half decade with the Patriots last year, and his fewest yards per attempt since 2002. We're all spending the offseason debating how deep the Bucs can go into the postseason. But maybe we should just take a step back and ask the question, what if Brady just lost it? What if the only positive things we can say about him are, 1, he doesn't age, and 2, he doesn't throw interceptions? Isn't that pretty bad? No one's even floating the possibility that he just lost it. Everyone's just throwing it to the offensive cast he was surrounded with last year. And I think we should at least question and put Brady at the cul-de-sac or crossroads or fork in the road of this debate.
I think that's fair. I wrote the NFC South preview for the Draft Magazine, which you can all check out later on this summer. Tom Brady individual numbers dropped significantly. And there are times when we should be able to isolate a player and look at his individual production and say, okay, is he hindering or is he helping his offense? And while I would say his supporting cast was hindering Tom Brady last year, I would also say that Tom wasn't necessarily elevating the pieces around him as he had done in previous years. But Daigle, I also ask, does that even matter? Like, does it matter to a significant degree that he has to do that in order to be successful with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Because really what they are telling you is we are moving away from the type of quarterback who can make throws only a handful of quarterbacks can make in the NFL, who also commits more turnovers than anyone else in the NFL, to a quarterback now, to a passer who relies on his decision-making, pre-snap, post-snap, and we can win with someone surrounded by Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rob Gronkowski, O.J. Howard. I can list off a handful of other names. And if we just get the ball to them in the right time with space, we're going to win offensively. And I like that game plan. I side with that game plan more so than the former.
That's a fair assessment, but we're not even leaving it to the possibility that maybe their offense just got worse by adding Brady, right? Like maybe they literally just got less explosive and worse, and no one's even discussing that.
I mean, the cliff does exist. I mean, we saw Peyton Manning was 2013 historically good. Then he was basically as good in 2014 until Jeff Fisher, of all people in St. Louis, just beat the absolute hell out of him. He got sacked like 6 or 7 times, and he was just never the same after that game. It was like literally a one-game turning point in Peyton Manning's career. So we know the cliff exists. I mean, when you're 43, it can't be far away for a football player. But it is like chicken and the egg last year. Was it Brady's arm or was it his supporting cast? And I thought the arm looked noticeably different last year, noticeably shot. But then he's still graded as a good deep passer on Pro Football Focus. And the supporting cast, I mean, it's not made up. The supporting cast was bad. Even Mohamed Sanu, they couldn't use him the way they wanted to because he immediately hurt his ankle. He played through it. But the supporting cast angle was real. But I did think the arm strength angle was also real. And so it's just, to me, it's very hard to separate what to place, put more stock in, the age or the supporting cast last year. I mean, this is up there with the best supporting cast he's ever had. I mean, you could argue maybe even is better than the Randy Moss, Wes Welker, Randy Moss. He's obviously no one even close to Randy Moss level. But I mean, as a whole, this is an elite supporting cast.
2 points. One, I think we forget how awful Peyton Manning was his final season with the Denver Broncos. When
we don't forget.
Yeah, no, we didn't forget that.
We do
Josh.
not forget.
I don't know.
Benched for Brock Osweiler.
I know you two didn't forget it, but I believe people out there in the universe have forgotten it because, yes, there were times when Brock Osweiler outplayed him that season, and it wasn't Peyton Manning other than in that playoff run when he finally was making good decisions. And he was super turnover prone.
Even in the playoffs, to be honest.
The Panthers were the favorites in the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, and Cam played wonderful, but the numbers won't point to that. 2, Daigle, maybe this is a lunch bet here. In the final blurb and paragraph of our team previews in the draft guide, it is bold predictions, which is another conversation in itself among the Rotoworld Slack chat. My bold prediction was this. Tom Brady records at least 32 total touchdowns next season. Just 7 quarterbacks hit that mark last season, including Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston hit 34. So I'm only expecting 2 fewer touchdowns from Tom Brady last year. In comparison, Brady only had 27 total touchdowns in 2019. What do you think?
What is his – okay, I don't want to give myself a bad line. I'm going to look at his actual –
I just gave you a ton of context.
Yeah, but you didn't give me the odds. I'm not going to –
I think he'll hit it. I mean, 27s are shocking. I wouldn't have guessed he had 27 even last year. And I mean, there's going to be layups here for the taking. He's got every kind of skill set in that supporting cat. I mean, he's got deep threats. He's got intermediate threats. He's got seam threats. He's got slot threats.
So if quarterback numbers and production is fairly sticky year to year between 2019 and 2020, that means he'll be maybe just one of 7 or 8 quarterbacks at 32 touchdowns this season. That's pretty damn good if he does that, Daigle. Daigle's trying to do so much research right now. It's freaking lunch, Daigle. This is not $1,000.
Have you seen how big your chicken salads are every day?
That's true. It's a $12 salad.
I just want to say, Josh, I'm very frustrated. I wanted to fully sell Tom Brady because the eye test, I thought he failed spectacularly.
There we go.
But then he ended up in such a foolproof setup that I don't know what to do.
Well, now I don't want to read it because I pretty much just lost myself an edge on this. FanDuel Sportsbook has Brady's over-under at 29.5 touchdowns.
So
I would take the over.
Are you still taking 32?
Well, I'm taking the over on that. Yeah. Well, I had to be bold prediction here, for the draft guide for Ed Williams out there. I had to do it.
This is probably bad odds for me. All right. We'll bet lunch. Virtually bet lunch. All right. So that makes it 2. I have a running doc in the background, by the way.
Good.
So don't you
worry. Update it, and I will move on.
Robert Woods over Cortland Sutton against Pat, and Tom Brady under 32 touchdowns from me. Got it.
There we go. Okay. Ryan Pace is facing a crossroads in the NFL this season. I was recently on an NBC Sports Chicago podcast with JJ Stankovitz, and one moment completely left me stunned from it. He asked if the Bears should have spent one of their mid or late round picks on a quarterback, and I said no, it didn't matter because if the Bears have a top 10 selection this year, meaning they might take a quarterback, that means Ryan Pace isn't going to have a job. And he gave me this weird look. So I basically asked him, well, do you not believe Ryan Pace will be fired in that scenario? And he said, absolutely not, which is stunning to me. Ryan Pace has had every single opportunity that should be afforded to a general manager to prove that he is a good decision maker in the NFL. I mean, he took the number 2 pick on a quarterback, and he's been an absolute bust.
It wasn't a deep quarterback draft, though, Josh.
Yeah, it wasn't Sean Watson and Patrick Mahomes and whoever else we're going to throw in there. Then he traded for one of the best defensive players in the NFL in Khalil Mack, and really they haven't progressed far enough in the playoffs to necessarily justify the cost that it took to that. And now he's brought in a veteran quarterback with playoff experience to kind of steady the ship. I mean, what else does a general manager have to do, who's been the general manager since, I believe, 2015, to show if he can be one of the good general managers in this league, right? I think that there's like a big separator between maybe the top 10 that should be employed. There's like this middle 10 that can get lucky for stretches, and this like bottom 12 that should just be fired like every 2 or so years because there just aren't enough good people out there that can run an NFL team. Ryan Pace should be in that bottom 12 right now. And I'm just stunned, and maybe I don't know the dynamics or the politics of the organization right now. I'm just stunned. It seems like he has a long leash heading into 2020.
They have 10 tight ends on their roster, one of them being Jimmy Graham. I think that's all the resume you need to fire him next year if they're not successful.
10 tight end Pace, man. I think maybe they're down to 9 now.
They probably are
up to 11.
But one of them's still Jimmy Graham, so the point stands.
JJ's a friend of the site, but I mean, Ryan Pace will be fired. I mean, the best case scenario for him would be like he gets like a pandemic pass, for like the weird off season. But yeah, I mean, Ryan Pace is fully on the hot seat. He already was. Like, he's getting kind of like his Doug Marrone bonus here. And, it's kind of good to see teams, I don't know, fans could argue it's not good. Teams have almost been erring more on the side of patience the past few years. Like we saw the Redskins take it forever with Jay Gruden. And that's good. I mean, I guess there's some merit to that. But, I mean, Ryan Pace is already on 1 year too many, in my opinion. And, yeah, if the Bears are not good this year, which they won't be because they added Nick Foles, but they have one of the least – they have so few playmakers on offense. I mean, they have a true number one receiver, and then I guess they have a great scat back. But, I mean, that's not – it's such a huge wasted opportunity for the Bears too because the Bears defense actually barely regressed last year. One of the easiest predictions of 2019 was that the Bears defense would regress off its historically good form, and it wasn't as good as it was in 2018, but it was still by far one of the best defenses in the league last year, and they completely wasted it. And there's just further regression for the defense, and just going to be not enough progression on offense. And every year, Ryan Pace does not have a good offseason.
If anything, it's proved that Pace legitimately knows nothing about evaluating offensive players because he's gotten by for 2 years now under the Nagy reign by elite defensive play. But even then, that unit falling back just last year, like you saw, the offense couldn't carry the weight and is certainly not built to lead that team. They have to have their defense play elite. Yeah.
And look, I'm not saying he can't evaluate, right? Like some of the players on defense, he found them later on in drafts, like Eddie Jackson is one who was a 4th-round selection who has turned into one of the best playmaking safeties in the NFL. Then the other side of this is, like I always point to decision makers and how you should judge them is based on like their stand-on-the-table moments, right? The ones where they trade up and they identify a player that they have to have. Well, one of those is obviously Mitch Trubisky. Then other two recently have been Anthony Miller and David Montgomery. And I think the jury is still out on both of those players as well. And he also, like, you try to figure out what the vision is for an NFL team from the decision maker. And I don't know if Ryan Pace, like, I don't know what Ryan Pace's is for his own team, right? Because if you go up and trade for a player like David Montgomery, then you should then try to invest as much as possible in the offensive line. And their biggest offseason signing along the offensive line was Jermaine Ifedi.
Yeah, let's say.
And, and Jermaine Ifedi couldn't even cut it on the Seattle Seahawks offensive line. So I don't know. That's just not how I don't work for an NFL team, but I also know I wouldn't, not really, just a cup of coffee. It's one where I was that stunned that someone so close to the team is probably more correct than I am about the dynamics of who's firing and who's getting hired, was just so certain that no matter what, Ryan Pace is going to have a job in 2021. So.
Yeah, reporter, they can be close to the situation. They can be being fed things to, over and over again by the team, by sort of like, Ryan Pace's job is secure. And it's just a different situation for Jay. He's in a completely different setup than we are with it. But outside, and two, organizations believe these things often. They might be fully believing what they're telling people that no, Ryan Pace's job is safe, but organizations believe things right up until the moment they don't. And if the Bears season goes the way we're thinking it's probably going to go, he's not going to have a job.
All right, Pat, who else is facing a crossroads this season in the NFL?
I mean, it's Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, because the Bills Sean McDermott's project is ahead of schedule for like what he's responsible for, the defense. Like he's like the Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan of defense in terms of like young coaches. He's like the brightest young defensive coaching mind in the NFL. And like, he's got his side on lockdown. But I think maybe he bit off more than he could chew in the front office and like designing the offense. And Brandon Beane is technically the GM, but they're not going up and getting Josh Allen through 2 separate trade-ups if it did not have Sean McDermott's strong seal of approval. And so he's like tethered his ahead of schedule defensive project to this huge project at quarterback. And, I think we saw Josh Allen, the concerns he had coming out of Wyoming, they're no longer concerns, but they're fatal flaws, the accuracy and the decision-making. That has never been better highlighted than in the wild card round. I mean, they are, to me, straight up fatal flaws. And this is not the person this otherwise very successful project needs to be tethered to on offense. And like in the fantasy community, Josh Allen's actually getting some hype, but like in the Bills, the coach speak, the GM speak has already been kind of putting Josh Allen on notice. I can't remember the exact, but they were saying like they basically came out and said like, this depends on Josh this year. They put Josh on the hot seat already. And then they drafted Jake Fromm, which, we can laugh at, but it was a 4th round pick, and he can be an NFL game manager for a season or 2 probably. So it was not like a totally irrelevant pick, in my opinion, when it comes to Josh Allen. And yeah, I think the Bills are kind of acknowledging the Josh Allen hot seat reality maybe more than some of like the football media community is.
I don't know if it's so much warranting the hot seat as it is knowing he needs to develop in his 3rd year, though. Because remember, only his 3rd year. I still expect we'll see all 5 years of Josh Allen play out on his rookie deal in Buffalo, barring like a catastrophic disaster in performance. But you mentioned the wild card game, and I would think the wild card game, you could actually attest to his strength as well, because they are doing what a lot of teams don't do. The Ravens, for instance, with Lamar Jackson, got offensive coordinator, slips my mind.
Greg Roman.
Thank you. Greg Roman, to cater to his personnel and just call the plays that strengthen their personnel. And that's what Buffalo's doing as well. Year 1 of the Josh Allen project, they went out and signed, last year, 5 to 7 offensive linemen.
Yep.
That way they could give or take and strengthen that unit in front of them. This year they went out and added another weapon so they didn't have to put Duke Johnson out on one boundary for the playoffs again, and added Stephon Diggs, one of the best route runners in the entire league. So I think they continue building around Josh Allen because they want to see this play out for all 5 years.
To me, the crossroads is now we have seen one dynasty end. Could one begin? And could that one be the Buffalo Bills, right? Like we mentioned it at the start of this podcast. They should be favorites for this division. Is it the crossroads? Well, is it the crossroads that they can match that? Can they match those expectations that they really have never had in their past? And one final thought on Allen.
Except for the entire 90s.
Well, sure. I was like 5 years old at that time. The other part of this is Josh Allen is who he is. And he's winning the exact same way in the NFL as he won in college. And so your evaluation for the Bills was correct if you liked that style. A weakness is never going to turn into a strength, right? Strengths only get stronger. And I think we've seen that. And I think that they've done a pretty good job of trying to build around him and giving him all the opportunities to succeed. But it's in those final moments. And trust me, I love riding on the Josh Allen roller coaster. It's in those final moments of like, okay, game's on the line, a minute, 15 seconds left, or down 2 scores with 6 minutes left. Do you trust him to make all the perfect decisions in that final phase of the game, in that final quarter, for you to come out on top and come from behind and win those games? Or is it like neutral and positive game scripts, pedal to the floor player, boom, we're going to make plays and make it happen? And that's where I think we learned a lot about Josh Allen, this Buffalo Bills team this year. So
I would say even as a rusher last year, he had the touchdowns, but on a per carry and per game basis, he was also much less efficient. I just think I think the Bills are acknowledging he's on the hot seat in my just from reading between the lines of what was said. Which of course isn't that useful because I can't remember the exact quotes.
If only Cam Newton were a free agent, who Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have experience with, who is a true pocket passer. Maybe that would be a good quarterback to go out there and get. So
it would be so talk about someone to teach Josh Allen and to be the backup plan. It would make so much sense.
Okay, we have gone through 6 of these. Do we want to go through another cycle real quick, or do you think that's good?
You're the host, Josh. We don't know.
I got one more on my paper, but
okay, let's go quick.
Okay.
Yeah, Daigle, go quick, and we'll go quick.
I'll highlight Matt Nagy being a head coach at the Crossroads. Did not mean for this to happen with Ryan Pace's conversation as well.
This could be a quick conversation.
But no clue if it's true, but you could at least float the idea that the playbook and Nagy's creativity was only limited last year because of Mitchell Trubisky. And there's no excuse for that now. In 2018, Nagy's first year as head coach, he proved capable, but he also, the Bears, faced the 3rd easiest slate of defenses, including the 6th easiest schedule of passing defenses, and yet they still ranked number 21 overall in Football Outsiders DVOA. Last year, 9th easiest schedule, but moves backwards in DVOA at number 25 overall. So this is the year the excuses are out the window because Foles is more well-versed than Trubisky is with the entire cast of coaching staff. John DeFilippo, he obviously played with them with the Jaguars and Eagles. OC Bill Razor, he played under him in Philadelphia. And then Nagy with the Eagles and the Chiefs. So Nagy's coaching career, possibly even just his creativity as this offensive guru, seems like it's at a fork in the roads.
I don't know. I wasn't thrilled with Nagy as an individual play caller last year. Like some plays have been floating on Twitter in recent weeks where it's basically near the goal line. He's asking his wide receiver to run like a speed out, and it's the only receiver in a route on the entire field. Like I think Nagy, and I understand, and who knows if he was being limited by Mitch and his capabilities, but I feel like we have a lot to learn about Matt Nagy as well. So I understand that he's at a crossroads from coming from that Chiefs offense and coaching tree to what he is and what he has to work with now.
I agree with both you and Matt Nagy. He had some cringeworthy moments last year, but I really do think it was because he was just out of ideas of how to score points with Mitchell Trubisky as his quarterback.
All right, I'll go do a quick one. Let's talk about Matt Patricia. What evidence is there that Matt Patricia is a good NFL head coach? I mean, he's 9-22-1, which in fact makes him a proven loser right now, if we're being honest. This is a defensive mind who came from obviously the Patriots coaching tree, yet we are so much more excited and confident in that team's offense. Matthew Stafford, Kenny Galladay, Marvin Jones, T.J. Hawkinson, Kerryon Johnson, DeAndre Swift. And then we go to the defense. And whenever I think like New England Patriots, I think of people that are able to take a step back and evolve and change.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.